Double ones too. You got a lot to do today. I have a feeling you have homework, which is someone sitting here?
So you are. Okay, it's running. Well, let's get started. As always, there's a prayer. So on this, I know I gave you lots of paper today. On the top of this one, there's a prayer. I'll let everybody take a seat here, then we'll pray. This one has the prayer on top. The one that's in your hand. This one, right here. There's a seat in the front or way in the back. It's up to you where you want to sit. You want to be a good Presbyterian?
No.
Good Presbyterians sit in the back. That's what I'm saying.
Well, then.
Okay, let us pray. A great God, humble us so that we will be capable of hearing your word. We thank you for the gift of yourself in Scripture. We rejoice in its complexity. Give us the simplicity to be confounded by your word. Amen. Okay, so what we're going to do today. I've given you a whole bunch of paper, which I know I don't normally do, but most of it is photocopies from study Bibles. So this one that has a staple in it. The first one is the NRSV, which we'll talk about. It's called the Cultural Backgrounds Study Bible. Turn the page on that stapled one. It's an NIV Study Bible, and then the other photocopy is another NRSV version, but it's from a study Bible that focuses on kind of spiritual practices. So one of the things I want to highlight is, one of the things that we talked about we're going to do in here this time is talk about study Bibles, and study Bibles come in a variety of forms, right? So it depends on what you want to study. So if you've been coming to this class regularly, I tend to emphasize things like history and culture. You can get study Bibles that focus on that. You can get study Bibles that focus on theology. So you could get a Catholic study Bible. It's going to focus on that. You could get a Reformed one, a Lutheran one, a Methodist one. There's a C.S. Lewis study Bible that's like got C.S. Lewis's writings kind of paired with biblical passages. And you can also get ones that are more focused on personal devotion. So one thing we're going to do today is to look at some of those things, right? And the way I want to have us do this is to look at John chapter 3. So ideally we would have done John 3, 1 through 21. I couldn't fit it all on the page, and it's already small print, right? But what I want us to do is both look at some study Bibles, look at some different translations of the Bible, and then talk about like what do we see are the differences. And I picked John 3 for obvious reasons, right? If there's a verse I can count on everybody knowing, it's John 3:16, right? We'll even talk about that verse. But this is also where we get the language of being born again, right? It's not language that we typically use much as Presbyterians, but it's very much in the sort of DNA of American Christianity, and I think it'll be helpful to highlight that, because what I'm going to show you is that what's happening in John 3 with the born again language is actually notoriously hard to translate. We think it's this really simple, basic thing. It's actually really fun to see what's going on in the text. So here's how I want to propose that we do, and again, I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to break you up into like sections. And we're going to each look at one of these photocopies. So why don't we we'll kind of go at an angle here. You four, and then Jim over. You can look at the top one on this stapled sheet. We'll get you and over here maybe to Doug. We'll look at the second one, and the rest of you can look at this separate sheet. right? And just, I mean, you can talk to yourselves if you wish, but what I'm going to ask you to do is read the passage, like read, John 3, maybe 1 through 16, and then look at what the study Bible notes tell you. So again, if you look at my photocopies, and I'm sorry, sometimes it's small print, right? But there's notes on the bottom. There'll be a chart, right? So read a passage that you're probably fairly familiar with, and then look at the notes and see if there are things that you learn or you're surprised by. I'm getting some looks. So is it only John 4 on both sides? So it should say John 3. It's 3 here.
That's what you want.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Hello, Betty. Did you get the hand? We must have used all the handouts.
Oh, they're gone.
Okay.
Oh, goodness. That's all right.
Well, if you make more, I would give them.
Well, I could definitely email you more, print out more, but if you guys want a share for now.
I got it, yes, thank you.
Could you
Yes, sir.
tell me what the NRSD cultural background one is?
That's this one. It's this one right here. The one on the very top. Okay. This one, yeah. Sorry, I should have labeled that.
Study Bible, there we go. Yes.
The alternative, by the way, is if you brought your own study Bible, you could use that one instead. Right. I just want us to.
This is the week I did it.
Right.
I have John 3.
But that's the notes.
Yeah, sorry, I think we went through all the handouts already.
You've got a different one than I do.
I think I stapled the pages out of order. I think part of the problem is I stapled the pages out of order. So I think it starts with, well, there's 3 right there.
Because
Yeah.
I was looking at
Okay.
that.
Yeah, I would do the other one. So 3 right here. Yeah, that's my fault.
I'm reading 3.
Yeah, there's 2 different Bibles passages in here. That's part of the issue. Right, it's okay.
My afternoon, part of my afternoon. You got it? Here, I'll take yours. You just turn around.
Yes. Yes, please. No, sorry, this is confusing. I'm learning. Right.
All right, so we're reading
Yeah.
3, which we
Yeah.
did, but then are we looking at?
Yeah,
this? Do you want us
look at some of these notes or in that, and just that's what I just want you to see what's there. That one, it's the translation is the NRSV, which is what we use, but on the handout, if you look at that other sheet, the sheet that's mine,
Yeah.
this is the one you guys are doing, number 3.
Okay.
So it's that's what a study Bible is focusing on, different things. Yeah.
Well, I think it says too is the cultural background.
Yep.
We're back here.
The top, this is the top of this. It says NRSD.
They're doing.
At this point, let's just look. Let's just look, and we'll make. Oh, I'm so sorry. I just spilled your coffee. That's my fault. We'll clean it up
What are
afterwards.
they doing the third one? This one's doing here?
At this point, I think you guys should just look at what you want to look at, and because we're going to come back together in a minute or 2 anyway.
Okay.
So, I don't. Yeah. You don't need to read it out loud. Just, yeah. If we were all reading it out loud, we wouldn't hear anything. So. By the way, I'm giving you a big hint. Well, what I want you to focus on is the words in this other handout I have it on there. Like the words in bold, like pay attention to how they actually translate the phrase born again. Because not all of the Bibles will translate it that way.
Right.
There you go.
Which translation? Yeah, that is in verse 3. That's where we put Oh, culture.
I'm going to give you one more minute. It's okay. Yeah, it's not exhaustive. We're okay.
Use that.
Okay, let's come back as we can. So part of what I wanted you to do is read it and look at the notes. And I heard a couple of you talking. So again, if you go to this, by the way, I will admit I need to give you guys better directions. I'm springing a whole new thing on you without explaining it real well. So my apologies. So if you look at this one. And it says it should say cultural backgrounds study Bible on the top or something like that. Yeah. If you go down to the very bottom of the first page and 3:3, I heard one of you talking about over here. It says born from above, and that's how the NRSV translates the phrase, right? Very truly I tell you, no one can see the kingdom of God without being born from above. And again, we're probably used to hearing a language of born again, right? And if you go through it, right, Nicodemus says, how can anyone be born after having grown old? Can he enter his mother's womb a second time and be born? And they go back and forth talking about this, right? So we've seen born from above, we've seen born again. If you look at the back of this handout, I'm giving you some other translations too. Okay, these are in bold. I'm giving you the King James in the original with the spellings and everything, so have fun with that. If you look on verse 1, there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. There's a letter there called a thorn, which is a TH sound. That's the. Right, so this is the old spelling. But there you can see it says born again, right? If you go to the next column, this is the message, which is a paraphrase. It says born from above. It says born again, right? It's using both phrases. And I'm giving us one more kind of contemporary English translation, the Common English Bible. It says born anew. So what's going on? Anybody want to take a stab at it? Does anybody like old comedy? Mm-hmm. So there's a a skit that I'm guarantee you almost everyone in this room knows. Who's on first? Right. That's what's happening in this passage.
Oh, my goodness.
So I can tell you what the Greek word is. It's hanothen, but it has two meanings. It can mean from above, and it can mean again. And what's happening is they are, like, when you read this passage or hear it, you're supposed to hear the same phrase, but they mean the word in a different way. So like the whole joke of who's on first, right? It's funny because the guy who's on first, his name is who, right? And so they say who's on first as a indicative statement, and the other guy turns it into a question, right? Well, that's kind of what's happening here, right? So Jesus is saying, you need to be born from above. You need to be born from God, from the Spirit, not from the flesh. And what Nicodemus hears is, you mean I'm supposed to crawl back into my mom's womb and be born again? So it's the same word, but they're both giving it a different meaning. Right? Well, how do you capture that in a translation? It works in the original Greek because it's the same word. Right? They're both using the word like who, like we do in the joke who's on first, right? If you want to translate it well, you have to translate Jesus' statement with a different word than Nicodemus' statement, even though they're saying the same word, right? But this is part of the problem with translating, of if you want to get the meaning across, sometimes you need to translate the same word with a different English word, right? I mean, this is the easiest thing I can do this with English, and I've used it all the time. But what does the word gay mean?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Sometimes it means, and its older meaning means someone who's happy, someone who's joyful, right?
Yeah.
But it's the meaning has transformed over time, right? Now it means something else, right? Well, that's not quite what's happening here, but again, it's the same word that has two different meanings. So to understand this passage correctly, you have to get that there's this confusion happening. Nicodemus actually doesn't understand what Jesus is talking about.
So how do we know what to believe?
Well, I mean, what we want is for people who can go look at the original languages, right, and tell us these things. And if you can't do that yourself, which most of us can't, right, what do? You get a study Bible, right, which is why this cultural background's a study Bible. What is it telling you? It's saying in that note, born from above, right? And it's been, when they talk about above, they mean heaven. They mean where the place where God is, right? Think about when Jesus talks about the kingdom of heaven. What does he mean? He means God's kingdom, right? He's saying the kingdom up there where God is, right? But this is the kind of thing we need help to point these kinds of things out, right? There's something interesting happening here, and it makes the passage all the more interesting, actually. When you understand, there's this back and forth, yes. And Nicodemus doesn't get what's happening, right? The other question I asked you on my handout, if we're going to read this in context, right? What could we say about the person Nicodemus? So I tried as best as I could in the photocopies to also give you a John chapter 4. We're not going to take the time to read it, but does anybody know what happens in John chapter 4? Or who the main character is, other than Jesus? The Samaritan woman, right? So I'm going to just really quick point out some things to you about those two stories. What are the conditions like when Jesus meets Nicodemus? Dark. It's dark. It's at night. And again, if you read it, it's quite clear. Nicodemus is deeply confused. He doesn't know who Jesus is, really. He knows he's important. He knows he's come from God. But he doesn't understand really what Jesus is teaching. And Jesus even tells him this. He says, you are a teacher of Israel and you don't understand these things? Right? Jesus kind of makes fun of him, right, up to a degree, right? He's pointing out that he's ignorant. He shouldn't be. He's a leader of the people of Israel. He's a Pharisee. He sits on the high council, right? I mean, he's an important, educated person, but he doesn't get what Jesus is talking about. Next, a chapter, we're in the light. It's the middle of the day. Jesus meets the woman at the well. The Samaritan woman, right? And she actually seems to quite clearly get who Jesus is. She identifies him as the become Messiah. She asks him for help. He says, I've come to serve the Jews. She says, well, even the dogs take the scraps from under the master's table, right? She actually knows what Jesus is up to, right? So there's a contrast here. Nicodemus is the clueless one. The woman at the well isn't, but everything's been overturned, right? He's the one who ought to get it. He's the male in a very patriarchal society. He's the educated. He's the leader.
He's the Jew.
He's the Jew also, right? And she's a Gentile. She's a woman. She's uneducated. She's a common kind of peasant person, and she gets it, right? So again, what I'm trying to point out to you is one of the dangers that we oftentimes do with the Bible is we grab onto a verse. I was just talking about someone with this earlier. We grab onto a verse and we say, what is God saying to me in this verse, right? And I think God does work that way, right? But often the way the Bible is actually supposed to be used is we read it as a whole, right? So, John chapter 3, which is this famous thing about being born again, right? Actually only really makes a sense when you read it with John chapter 4. You need the contrast of Jesus and Nicodemus are talking past each other. You need to see that Nicodemus is ignorant. Then you need to see that this common woman isn't. Right? She gets what it means to follow Jesus. Nicodemus doesn't. Right? Nicodemus, by the way, comes back at the end of the gospel. Anybody remember what he does? Helps take him to the tomb. And what does he do? He buys perfume for Jesus' body. He anoints his body, right? He buys about 100 pounds worth. He's basically saying, stay dead. Stay really dead. Right? It's these little kind of details here of Nicodemus in the end isn't actually a faithful follower of Jesus. He's someone intrigued by him. He realizes he's special. But he doesn't actually get it all the way to the end, right? And that's actually a story of the Gospels as a whole, right? Nobody gets who Jesus is, really, until he comes back from the dead, right? If you went to church earlier, I think Christine preached on the transfiguration, right? One of the things happening in that story is, right, Jesus is being revealed for who he really is, right? And the disciples still don't get it, right? Peter wants to build a tent and charge an entrance fee. Come see Jesus, right? But I just want to point this out this. Go ahead.
If we were Greek and reading the Bible, the Greek version of the Bible, would we have a different understanding of it than if we were English? Our language is English and we're reading.
So I want to be very careful the way I answer this, but the answer is a very careful yes and no, right? And I mean that, but I want to let me unpack that, right? Yes, to the degree of they would have caught things like I just pointed out to you. They would have that language game, this play on words that's happening with the again, right, in the back. They would pick up on that immediately, right? Again, try to translate the who's on first a joke into, let's say, Spanish or German or whatever language you all know, right? It would be practically impossible. You'd have to explain the joke, which is what we have to do here. The joke doesn't work on its own anymore in English. I have to explain the joke to you, and then it's not as funny, right? That's part of it, right? I'll get there. Right. The other thing is, right? Again, you fall into patterns. We think in our native language, right? And so, some of it is word meanings. So one of the words that drives me crazy increasingly when we read it in the Bible is the word justification. It's a big theological word, right? And it's taken on all of this theological meaning about we're being made right with God and restored to favor with God, right? But it's also just the everyday Greek word for a justice. Right? And so I'll get there in just a second. Right? And so we have taken what's actually a fairly common concept of we're supposed to be people of justice. and that justice means following God. And we've turned it into this big technical thing of, well, we got to believe in Jesus, and we got to get baptized, and then God does something to us and makes us just, right? And there's truth to that, but it isn't that complicated. It's love your neighbor, treat them fairly, right? And we pulled those things apart, right? Because we need sometimes to separate that. Sometimes we're talking about God making us just, and sometimes we're talking about God calling us to act justly. But there's all kinds of overlap. But we pull the concepts apart, right? And so reading it in the original, you wouldn't tend to do that. You would see the connection.
But is that our Western mind doing that, trying to make it logical?
I mean, I definitely think that's part of it too. I mean, there's that I need to try to make a sense of it and make it logical. But then Greek is a Western language too, right? And again, that's even part of the problem of most of the New Testament is being written by people in Greek when their first language isn't Greek. Their first language is Hebrew because they're Jews. But they're trying to make it accessible, right? So even sometimes that's what we have to do. I mean, we have this New Testament, right? And so I bet you all have Bibles that are red letter Bibles, some of you. Yes. These are the words Jesus spoke. Hate to tell you, but there's not a thing in here that he spoke.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't speaking it in Greek.
Yeah.
Someone's already translated it from the language he was speaking. We actually don't have any of his words verbatim in Aramaic, which would have been the language he was speaking, right? So someone's already translated it. I'm seeing all kinds of hands. You were first.
Matt, thank you for what you're saying, because I'm confused because I'm stuck by virtue of what I bring to the scriptures. For example, the cosmology I have in mind when you talked about heaven and high above, that's not what it's about.
Right.
But I got stuck there because I was dealing with the cosmology of that time and this time. So, thank you.
Right, so again, right, this is an important point of, we don't really think heaven is up in the sky. We can't build a spaceship and get to it.
Yeah.
I can't dig a hole and get down to hell.
So are you kind of saying that the words don't matter, but the actions do?
Well, the actions, but I think this is again part of the thing. It's yes, it's actions for some things, but it's also ideas matter more than the exact words, right? So here's another little silly example. We oftentimes talk about Jesus being in our hearts because the Bible does. And the Bible does actually use that very phrase. Like in Greek, it's using the word kardios. That's where we get the word heart from, right? But other times, and actually this is the phrase Jesus uses more, he talks about God being in your splunka, which is your intestines. Right? So that's actually the Jewish idea. God doesn't live. He doesn't live in your heart. He lives in your guts. Right? But we're not going to translate it that way in English because it's an odd phrase, and it means what we in English mean when we say something's in my heart. So in the Hebrew language, when you want to say something's dear to you, you don't say it's in my heart. You say it's in my stomach. Right? But so a good translation doesn't say in my stomach into English. It says in my heart because that's what it means in English.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? So
the man's heart's through.
So well, that's true as well. But it's my point of like a good translation is oftentimes not the most literal translation. It's the one that puts into English the best.
Well, you mentioned justice, the word justice. Now that can mean something that has nothing to do with God or Jesus, because an atheist could practice justice as being kind and fair and good. So.
Right. I mean, and again, but this is part of the point of is we have an everyday word. Justice. The Bible is actually using that everyday word, but from a different culture, and it's giving it a meaning in talking about different things, right? So again, even think about how we use the word justice. We might use it in a legal sense. We might use it in a moral sense.
Or just
we might,
one to others.
or a religious, and it has a different sense in all of those, but it's still tied with those other things, right? And that's something we have to unpack, right? And this gets more complicated when we are having to go from one language to another, right? Now, pause. The worst thing that could happen right now that you could do is to say, this is too hard, we can't really know, I give up.
I know that.
Right.
It's tempting though.
But it's the worst thing because it's not, we actually do a really good job of doing this, right?
Yeah.
But it isn't easy. You have to study. Like that's why I'm encouraging you to get a study Bible and like look at those concepts, right? Actually helps to have more than one, right? The other verse I want to look at in here is John 3:16, right? You all know John 3:16. We've talked about this before, so those of you who have heard me say some of these things before, don't give it away. I'm going to go here. You can look at the other ones, but I'm going to look at these ones. So in the old King James, towards the bottom of that column, we get, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life." Right? So the word I want to focus on there is the word so. For God so loved the world. What does the word so mean? If we go to the other column, the message, it says, "This is how much God loved the world." We don't even get the word so. He says, "This is how much God loved the world," right? And in the other one, this here, it isn't there. But the other, like the NRSV, the NIV also say, "For God so loved the world." So my question to you is, what does the word so mean in that sentence?
It's actually an addition.
So that's one.
Makes it better.
That's one. Anyone else? You looked like you were going to say something. So let's scramble. So yep. Truly would be a possibility, right?
A whole bunch.
A whole bunch, right? So this is where our 21st century English takes us. Exactly where your guys going. God loved us so much. That's how you're reading it, which is true, but it's not what this text is saying. The Greek word here is saying in this way. That's all that it means. So it's basically saying this is how God loved the world. Colon. What did he do in parentheses? He gave his only begotten Son. It's just saying this is how God showed his love for the world. It is true that God loves us so much, but it isn't what it's saying in this passage. Yep, Tim.
So, what is the Greek word for world?
Cosmos.
So that's pretty inclusive.
Yes. And that's also, I mean, again, we can say that too. Right? I mean, this is in our current context, obviously. This is coming up of, it's saying God loved the whole world. He didn't just love Israel. He didn't just love Western Europe or America. Right? He loved the whole world. Right? It's communicating Jesus is for all of this. But again, what is it saying? It's saying, how did God show his love for the world? What did he do? He gave his only Son. Right? Which, again, to really get that, we got to think of the whole Old Testament background to all of this, right? Any stories about fathers giving sons up? Right? I mean, the obvious one is Abraham and Isaac, but we get the product. I mean, we get all of these sort of stories that are there. Like this is a theme, right? And it's tapping into that. Of Dale, I think you had your hand.
No, I was just trying to think of another way of translating John 3:16 based on what we've been hearing here. Would it be something like, God loved the world in, world is also problematic. God loved the human world in this way. He gave his only Son. I mean,
that would be
cosmos has to do with human.
Yes, it does.
Society, right?
Though I do think there's an element here of all creation.
So,
but it's humans as
well.
Yeah. So I mean, how would I translate it? So if I was going to be very succinct in my language, I would say, but this is also a terrible contemporary English. Thusly did God love the world, because it's actually what the word means. Thus. Like, better English today would be, this is the way, this is how, this is the manner, right? But that's what it's pointing to.
So are synonymous?
Well, in this case, and that's actually what the word so means in the 17th century. So the King James is quite accurate for 1611. Right? But it doesn't mean that now. This is my point of the word so means so much, right? It doesn't mean thusly, but that's the word so has changed over time. You had your hand up, and then I think you too.
So when you mentioned that the word cosmos
Yeah.
is the correct word, Greek,
Yeah.
Greek you said?
Mm-hmm.
To me that means not only the world, but it means the entire universe or...
But this is where I think, what Dale's picking up on is it's also like, again, what do these words mean in a technical sense, right? And that's something we have to evaluate. So in Greek philosophy, cosmos is oftentimes used to mean the human sphere. And they have a different word to talk about the whole natural world. Or we use the word world, we might mean just the earth. And then we can say the universe. We mean everything.
Or Carl Sagan's use of cosmos.
Yeah. Right. So it's so part of this is just what do they mean, right? And that's the thing where like grammar can't help us. We have to try to figure out what is the human author, why did they choose this word? Right? Other examples are there's different words for love in Greek, right? If you get to this famous passage at the end of the Gospel of John where Peter and Jesus are talking, and Peter and Jesus go back and forth, and Jesus says, if you love me, you'll feed my sheep. He does that 3 times. Well, the 3rd time he actually uses a different word. And people have put all this meaning into it, right? But English doesn't have that. Right? So here's another illustration of this. At Advent, it's Lent, I think, we sing this song, Ubi Caritas. So, Ubi, how does it go? Ubi Caritas. So it's the words in there are Ubi, it's Caritas et Amor, right? Those are both, it says Latin, they're both words for love. We translate it in English as something as a charity and a love, which is terrible in a certain sense, because the first one, caritas, means self-giving love. This is the kind of love a parent has for a child. I will give my life for you.
Agape.
It's agape. A charity is the equivalent to agape in Greek, whereas amor is the equivalent to philia, which is like a friendship love, right? But how do to put that in English? We ought to say love and love, but that sounds bad. So we say charity and love, right? Again, this kind of stuff is happening constantly. Bob.
However, as Christians, I think, don't we believe that salvation is not just for human beings, it's for all creation, right?
Well, God talks about all creation being redeemed, whatever that means, right? Does that mean every dog that ever lived is raised from the dead? I'm not so sure, but I think there was another question here, and then did you have one a while ago?
I did, but I won't forget it.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay, Tim.
So, I'm amazed that you picked this verse. I'm probably more troubled by this verse than any other verse.
Which one, John 3:16?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I don't know really what that means, and I think it also is taken, it's like, at the end, it's like the carrot, the eternal life thing, and it feels sometimes that, because people that, what does that mean to believe in him? What does that mean? So,
excellent question, right?
And I think theologically this has created all kinds of issues for churches. Is my belief that strictly that Jesus died and rose from the dead? Is that my belief?
So hold on, let's pause there. So that's an excellent question. What does the word believe mean here? I'm asking. Somebody throw out An option. What do you think it means? So, no. Recognize something to be true.
Trust.
So trust. That's actually the correct answer, by the way. But we'll get there. Realization. So we can come up with all these things, but oftentimes we treat belief as assent to facts. That's what some of you were getting at, right? Which is oftentimes how it is treated in the church of, I believe what the church believes, therefore I'm saved. Right? That's oftentimes how it gets treated. Or I believe what Jesus is saying. I believe Jesus died for me and rose from the dead for me, so therefore I'm saved, right? So if we have this idea of if I have this faith, if I hold this to be true and I live my life according to it, that's what saves me, right? But the Greek word, I understand here, belief, right? It's what we need in English is a verb, faithed, which we don't have. We don't have a verb for faith. We have to go to belief. But it actually causes us to not quite get what's happening. And the better word is trust.
So why don't we just get rid of that?
Well, do you want my honest answer to that question?
Yeah.
So people who print Bibles, what's one of their goals in doing so? Sell them. They want to make money. Right? And so when a person, like when your average person on the street who doesn't know their Bible very well decides, I want to go buy a Bible, it's on New Year's, they've taken a New Year's resolution to read it more or something, right? And they go into a bookstore and they're going to buy a Bible. What verse do you think they turn to more than any other verse? John 3:16, because it's the verse that they know.
It's at every football game.
It's at every football game. It's all there. So, right? And if it doesn't say, for God so loved the world, they're going to say, this isn't how I learned it. I'm not going to buy this Bible. It's economics. That's why it isn't changed. You do have Bible translations that don't go with it, right? But they're honestly saying, like, fine, people won't buy it. But it basically turns into a specialized Bible, like a paraphrase, like the Message.
Do you have any idea at all how many languages the Bible is translated into?
Well, I think it's the most translated book. So I think, basically every language has some. But again, we were talking earlier, like your son is into linguistics and translation. You go to school to learn how to translate. They actually produce versions of the Bible in Greek and in Hebrew that are designed for translators. All the notes are, how would you translate this idea, right? Because it's actually really hard to take an idea from one language and put it into another, right? But some of the very things we've been talking about of what do words cover, right? It can be something as simple as heart and guts. Like we can make that the distinction pretty easy. I put it in English the best that I can to get the idea across, right? But bigger concepts get harder. And oftentimes what Bible translations do, or good translators do, is to say, let's be as ambiguous as possible because there's multiple possible meanings here, right? But sometimes a translator has to make a decision. You have to go one way or the other. And you hope you make the right decision. It's also why it's good if you can't read Greek and Hebrew, go read multiple translations in English. Don't read just one.
Epistole can be an abstraction. It can be knowledge.
Yeah.
It can be relationship.
Yeah.
It can be assent. So it's a combination.
Yeah, it is a combination of those things. Yeah. But I think the key concept Jesus has always said, what does Jesus constantly say? He isn't saying believe in me so much as follow me.
Yeah.
Right? And then I think this should be the way we think of this. Jesus is saying trust me. Right? It's the concept here, faith in a sense of like I have trust that my spouse is faithful to me. That's the idea. We're trusting that God really does care about us. He really is trying to do what's best for us. He's doing everything he can for us and for our salvation. Right? That's the concept. Right? It isn't, I believe in a set of doctrines. It's, I trust that God loves me and through Jesus he has saved me. Doug?
I think there was a popular song back when that said, I love you, but words just go away. And I think that's
it's like,
we can't come up with the right words for what.
Well, and again, that's what's helpful is we do what we're doing right here. We talk about it. Like, what does this actually mean, right? I mean, this is something that the Jews do really well that I think we as Christians could learn from. Of oftentimes the way that they engage in biblical interpretation is dialogue. Like you have two people who sit at a table, and you argue. Yeah, that's exactly right. But the point of the argument isn't to win, it's to let's figure out what this means. Like you go back and forth constantly. You look at different opinions, right? And we tend to take a one-sided approach of, I've got it figured out, everybody should listen to me.
If there's an English Bible that has different words for John 3:16, what are they?
Well, I mean, so like, if we, let's see, what do we...
Is there one that you can, I mean, you said you walk into a bookstore and if the book in English doesn't have,
Well, so the only one I could find here, I put it on this side, is the message right in the middle. It's actually in the third column. But it says, this is how much God loved the world. That's how they translate, which is pretty good, right? The problem with this translation is it's not really a translation. It's what's called a paraphrase. That's a technical distinction. A translation is trying to say, I'm taking a text in one language, I'm going to put it in another. And I'm trying to do that as accurately as possible. A paraphrase is, I'm going to take it from one language and explain it in the other. So if you notice even on this, how much longer that passage is than the other one.
Right.
Because it's not just translating it word for word. It's trying to say, it's basically a translation mixed with commentary. So,
the Amplified Bible.
Well, again, what's the Amplified Bible doing? It's amplifying the translation, right? So, I mean, the attempt is good, right? Of here I have the text of the Bible, and it's adding things to explain, right? That's fine. Where I wouldn't use it is in like a church service. I wouldn't get up and have a scripture read from that. I wouldn't want the preacher to preach from it. We should preach from a good translation. But for study, that's a perfectly good thing to do. Because that's basically what a commentary is. And I could bring you in like I've got a book that's on my desk right now. It's on 1 Corinthians, and it's this big, right? So, a book that's 1,200 pages long on a biblical book that's like 12 pages long, right? What is it trying to do? It's trying to explain the background, the cultural and historical context, theological relevance. Is doing all of these things, right? What's an Amplified Bible or a paraphrase? It's a commentary on a very smaller scale. That's kind of just doing it with the passage itself, right? Which they're very helpful. You should buy one. Like, go get a good paraphrase and read it, like the message. But don't let it be the only Bible you read. Right? Because again, that commentary, what it's already doing is pointing you in a certain direction. Like the commentator, the paraphraser, whatever we want to call that, they've got to take. They're going to take us down that path.
We used to call the Living Bible the Living and Growing.
Well, and that's another one. I mean, I think I have it. There's a New Living Bible, New Living Translation. It's on my sheet here. And what actually happened is someone said the Living Bible is too much of a paraphrase. Let's take this same kind of way of doing it, but make it a real translation, right? So, real quick, we can talk about this. By the way, I should have said this earlier. I'm not here next week. It's school break, and so we'll come back in two. But I put a real quick little sheet here of different translations of the Bible. We can talk about that a little more. But I mean, there's all kinds of things go into this too, of things from like a reading level. The NRSV, our Pew Bible, it's great. It's written at an 11th grade reading level, right? So your elementary school kids are going to have a hard time reading it, right? And it's the fact that the average U.S. adult reads at an 8th grade reading level. So it's actually too hard for the average adult.
Big Blue Bible.
So we have other right, which is actually why versions like the NIV are so popular, because they're actually written at an 8th grade reading reading level, right? I mean, these are all the things that go into thinking about how should we do this.
What is a kid's Bible?
I don't actually remember what it's called, right?
Are these different versions or translations of the Bible, is it like a spreadsheet? You put it all in different languages as well? You know what I'm saying? Is there like a Spanish?
Yes. So I mean, if you go in any well, that's not in NRS, but like every major language has multiple translations, right? So everyone's got like a King James. So if you think about the King James for us was the standard English translation from the early 1600s to the early 20th century. It was really the only one around. Yes, there were some other ones, but like they were very specialized, right? And it became so rooted in our cultural identity that like there are still people who say the only Bible you should read in English is the King James. Somehow God gave it authority. Right. Right. That's the problem. Right. But I mean, other languages have that too. So German, like Luther did a translation of both the New and the Old Testaments, and it's like their King James. Like it's the old standard. It's the one everybody has stuff memorized in. Right, it influenced the whole language, right? But of course, nobody really reads it anymore. They read all kinds of more contemporary translations, right? And that's also helpful. I mean, this is what biblical scholars do all the time. If they're trying to figure out, like, how do I get this idea into English, they'll also go read German Bibles and French Bibles and Spanish Bibles and see how did they do it, right? I mean, all of this is helpful, right?
Man, I don't want to be funny.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave and someone said to me, what happened to class today? Oh, I learned about solo?
So, right. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Well, I think we will end on that.